Next presentation will be made by Nicole Lohman. She is an archaeologist at the Utah State Office of the Bureau of Land Management in Salt Lake City. Thank you for joining us, Nicole.
Thanks. Okay. Good morning. Like Beth said, my name is Nicole Lohman, and I'm an archaeologist at the BLM Utah State Office in Salt Lake City. So today I'm going to talk about ways to improve your stewardship of rock art sites, along with some information on methods you can use with agency archaeologists to scientifically document rock art imagery. But first, you might be wondering what's going on in this photo. This first photo is of some damage that was done to a barrier canyon style pictograph site in the Book Cliffs of Utah. In this case, the vandals left their entire full name, and the BLM was able to track them down and successfully prosecute the case under the Archaeological Resource Protection Act. Documentation of changes like this in a timely manner can help agencies like the BLM be more effective and successful in their response to ARPA cases. And U.S. stewards are our best eyes and ears for reporting damages like this back in a timely manner. Let's see. So as with any time you steward a site, there's a couple of things you should do at home in preparation for your visit. The first thing is to fully read and make sure you understand the site form. Rock art site forms have a lot more information than other site forms, and we usually include forms for each panel and photographs or sketches of each rock art panel. And some sites are quite large and complex with many panels, so it's really important to familiarize yourself with where things are and how the site is organized. It's also important to review any past monitoring forms to get a good idea of any past impacts or changes to panels at the site. Sometimes graffiti at sites is old enough to be considered a historic inscription, and inscriptions are part of the site and shouldn't be documented at damage. So once you actually go out to steward your site and arrive at it, it's really important to kind of get your bearings and know where everything is. But while you're doing that, it's always really important to remember to never touch or apply any substances to the panels in order to see them better or to have them show up better in your photographs. So when you actually get to your site, after you've walked around and kind of initially inspected it for any new changes and documented those, it's important to revisit each individual panel. And if there's a question about if any change is new, remember to review any previous monitoring documents or site forms you might have access to. And if there is that new change, make a note and take a photograph. In order to help others find the impact again, it's really helpful to take a photo of both the entire panel and then a photo of the impact, like Sam was talking about. So what's really important for stewarding rock art sites is your photographs. They are, due to the nature of rock art itself, photographing rock art can be really difficult in comparison to other resources that you might monitor. In order to help out land managers and future stewards at the site, even including yourself, it's really important to take good photographs. It's important to make sure your photo is clear and in focus. It's also good to have something in the photo so it's easy to identify where it was taken. I always try to include a prominent part of the rock surface or a easily visible and identifiable figure when taking close-up photographs of any impacts. Like Sam said too, it's also really important to keep track of what panel you're documenting by keeping a detailed photo log. This is because many panels look really similar and it can be really difficult to sort out after the fact which panel is which without a caption that identifies it. Lighting plays such a huge factor with rock art, not only for taking photographs, but also for effectively monitoring sites. Pictographs can be faded, kind of like you can see in this photograph. And petroglyphs can be either really faint or highly repatinated, which means that the desert varnish has kind of obscured them. The best times to really visit rock art are either in the morning near dawn or late in the afternoon near dusk because you get that angular raking light. But usually our schedules don't allow us to be out there at such times. So we'll talk a little bit later on about how to work around some of the challenges with lighting in rock art. The other important consideration in taking photographs of rock art is the angle that you take them. Generally try to take photographs of panels as straight on or as perpendicular as you can to avoid distortion. So for the next couple of slides, we're going to look at pictures that demonstrate how not to take photographs of rock art. I'll be discussing how these photos could be improved to make them more useful for monitoring. So in this photo, you can see there's several petroglyphs across the middle, along with some faint scratch graffiti that cuts across it. This photograph's not bad, but without a caption, there's no way to know where this panel is, even what site it's at, or if the damage is new or has been previously documented. There's also really no discernible features on the rock surface, and the figures themselves aren't very unique and stand out, so it'd be difficult to find where this was located on the rock panel. Also, the lighting could be a little bit better in order for all of the pecked areas to show up better. In this photograph, you can really see the effects of how harsh lighting can obscure the panel. The good things about this are the framing of the photo and that there's discernible features of the rock present that will help those returning to the site be able to identify where the panel is actually located. But since that lighting's so harsh, it obscures portions of the panel. By looking at this, did you notice that there's actually an anthropomorphic human figure in the left in that light tan area, or that there's actually another sheep in the right light tan area? Probably not. You may also notice there's actually a photo. That's because it was part of a documentation project and some research that was going on. But for your stewardship purposes, don't attempt to put a photo scale in place like that or attach anything to the rock surface. This photograph also suffers from a number of problems. Like the last one, that harsh lighting is really obscuring a lot of the petroglyphs. You can see a couple kind of in the center on the surface facing us. But the other large problem is the angle that is taken at. Really, like I said before, you should try to go directly perpendicular to avoid distortion. And while that might not be possible in all cases, for this panel, it would be really easy. Just require the photographer to stoop down a little bit, which would also change the lighting and maybe eliminate some of those really harsh shadowing effects that are going on. This photo actually is okay, but for lighting, but the angle it's taken at is pretty severe. A straight on photograph is gonna reduce that amount of distortion and really help people who are coming back again able to relocate and clearly see things. So in this photograph, there's some problems with that it's taken at an upwards angle, so that does create some more of that distortion. And it's really difficult to make out the figures on it, just given how light the background surface is that the images are carved into. And while you can make slight improvements, if the panel is located above the photographer, it might not be possible to take a photo directly perpendicular without lugging out a huge amount of equipment, which is really impractical in a lot of cases. And then that lack of any patination or a darker background is going to make it hard to bring out any of those without, you know, doing a lot with sophisticated lighting setup. So in this case, it actually might be better to sketch or write a more detailed written description of any changes to the panel in addition to taking a photograph. In this last example of bad photography, this photo exhibits pretty much almost all of the errors you could do. It's blurry, it's out of focus, it's taken from an angle that's not directly facing the panel, and that harsh midday summer sun in the desert is causing a lot of shadows, including a shadow of the photographer. And since it's so harsh, it would be better if the person taking the photo actually tried to create some artificial shade to improve the quality of the photograph. And they should try to take that picture straight on as well. So what can you do? How can you take better photographs of rock art? So we can work on really improving the lighting, since that's such a challenge. So the lighting's never really going to be perfect when you visit a site 9 times out of 10. It's going to cause problems like what we've seen before. So to get a good photograph, kind of like that one at the top, there's a couple of ways you can work with the light that you actually have to improve visibility. If the lighting's really bright and harsh, you can work with another steward or kind of figure some things out on your own by creating shade, by using, your clipboard, your jacket, a car sunshade will do well, or even if you want to get fancy, you can use one of these photographic light bouncers or shades as well. Conversely, if the lighting's really poor, you can't see anything, and you need to kind of increase contrast, you can reflect lighting with a piece of paper, foil, that car sunshade again if you have a shiny side, or again, there's some different photography reflectors that you can use to kind of bounce. You probably will need a friend if you try to do that though. It's really important though that the tips I've discussed are really the best practices, but sometimes rock art's not located in a great spot, might not be safe to take photographs straight on, or bouncing light around is going to be a challenge. So it's really important to maintain situational awareness and consider your safety before trying to get that perfect picture. So we're going to change gears a little bit. And at some point you might have the opportunity to assist with either documenting a rock art site for the first time or redocumenting a site that was recorded in the past and needs to be updated. Usually there's opportunities to do this. You can reach out to your coordinator, agency archaeologist, and usually the rock art associations for each state are doing this quite often. It's important to remember that each agency and state, and even inside the state, they'll have different methods and forms to record sites in rock art. So you should always follow the direction and guidance of the land manager if you're able to participate. Same with paperwork. It varies significantly across states. So we're not going to discuss that. And we've talked about photographing. So I'm going to spend the next couple of minutes talking about different methods that can be used to sketch rock art panels. And why do we sketch? Well, if you've seen, many features don't show up in photographs. So sketches are used to kind of supplement and draw out some of those features you can't see. So one of the most basic methods for documenting is to sketch rock art using 2 rulers. It requires the least amount of equipment. Usually everybody has these sort of things on hand, and it produces a fairly basic sketch. What you do is you put a ruler along the x-axis and a y-axis, take a point at the intersection, and plot it on your graph paper in the corresponding location. You keep doing that on prominent features of the panel, then connect all the dots and fill it in. It's pretty simple in concept and it doesn't require any specialized equipment, but I've found people can find it really frustrating. And in comparison to other methods, the sketches tend to be kind of off, not very accurate. Another method that's really commonly used and archaeologists will know about is the string grid. And in this situation, you put a specially made grid of squares that's flexible, and each of those squares measures 10 centimeters. It's attached to the rock surface, but not being careful not to put any tape on the figures themselves. And then the person will draw the panel by drawing each of these individual little squares into a corresponding square on a piece of paper to scale. It's easier than the 2 ruler method, but it does require some specialized equipment and can take a while to learn. And apart from that, it often takes a while to draw each panel using this method. So now a newer method that's been used in Europe and isn't as well known here in the US is this acetate trace method. I actually learned it from the Rock Art Association here in Utah. And this method produces a more consistent and accurate sketch than the previous 2, and is a little bit more accessible to people who are scared off by needing to draw. You don't need any special drawing skills. However, it does require a lot of advanced legwork. Someone has to go out there, take scaled photographs of each panel and print them off before the actual recording day. When it is recorded, everyone gets one of those scaled photographs, and then they put a piece of clear acetate or a product called Duralar. In some cases, we've even used overhead transparency sheets, and they will trace that photo in the field. Why are they doing it in the field? Because not everything shows up in a photograph, like we've said. So they're able to look at the panel and add in those things that aren't showing up, but in the right place. And this actually ends up being fairly accurate and works really well. But like I said, it does require quite a bit of specialized equipment and legwork ahead of time. A way to kind of ameliorate some of those advanced work is to try a method like this tablet tracing, which is a little experimental. It hasn't been used a lot, but because a lot of tablets have their own camera on board, you can take the photograph and then trace it immediately while you're still in the field. It's really lucrative. Students and youth are really interested in this because it uses technology, but it comes with its own challenges. Learning a new program, constant changes in programs. There can be problems with your tablet picking up your hand and not actually what you're drawing. And then there's also problems with actually having a tablet in the field with battery life, and something you might not expect as these overheat. The sun glares down on them a lot. It'll cause an overheating error, and then you have to cool the tablet down. Also a lot of problems with glare. But it's an interesting concept, and moving forward might be something that is used more often. Other things that people may pursue is an older method, but still exciting and useful, is photogrammetry, which is taking a series of overlapping photographs to create a stereoscopic image. And that will create a 3D model if you put it in the right software. Requires some processing on the back end and a lot of storage space for those models. You can't really print them out very well. But you can monitor some more minute changes in erosion and impacts to panels. And actually teaching the field component of it is pretty, once you understand how it works, it's pretty easy, and volunteers and stewards are able to pick that up pretty easily. So interesting stuff there. So being a steward of rock art sites is a little different than other sites, just because there's some special considerations that you have to take into account. These sites are often the targets of graffiti and vandalism, also highly subject to erosion, sometimes falling. So it's really important to closely monitor for changes at the site and accurately report that information back to your land manager. The most important information is a good description of the vandalism and clear and useful photographs. Throughout this talk, I've discussed how to familiarize yourself with a rock art site prior to monitoring and best practices for taking photographs. While these are best practices, like I said, the unique nature and location of rock art panels may present challenges to applying these methods. So remember that your safety is the most important thing out there. I also delved into a couple of methods that might be used to professionally sketch rock art panels as part of initial documentation or redocumentation efforts. Like I said, if you're interested in helping document a site, contact your stewardship coordinator, agency archaeologist, or I highly recommend reaching out to your state rock art research associations. They really have a pulse on this and are doing a lot of projects and can probably hook you up. But if you have any further questions just about documenting rock art in general, how these methods compare to themselves, which is what my research has been on, please feel free to reach out to me at that email address. It's nlohman@blm.gov. I'd like to thank you for your time. And if we have time, I think I saw some questions come in that I can address.
Yeah, you're right, Nicole. We do have a couple questions. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about de-stretch.
Oh, I didn't include that in this, but I can. De-stretch is a photo enhancement tool developed by John Harmon, and then Robert Mark has developed a version of it too. There's one you can get on your phone. Otherwise, you also can use it on your computer. And when you take a photograph, it records a lot of color information that you can't see to the naked eye. So what this program does is it adjusts those color levels and pulls things out so you can see things that you can't see. But it really only works on pictographs where there's, you know, where they're heavily faded or, you know, that pigment's still there, but not a lot of it. So it'll draw that out. It works to varying degrees depending on where you are, what the lighting's like. But it does have a lot of potential and it's interesting to use. It's fun too. And if you have it on your phone, you're just going along, you can take a picture and see right away so much stuff that you might not be able to see.
Great. Well, thank you, because it's a lot of good information too, to help understand about how to photograph best.
Beth,
For yes, Johnny.
Johnny Poland. Could I ask Nicole a question?
Yes, go ahead.
Nicole, I've noted, at least here in Texas, some of our panels are quite tall. And when they painted them, they had some structures or whatever for like ladders or whatever, which you wouldn't be carrying out in the field. Therefore, trying to get up real high could be very dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
Do y'all think, or has anybody looked at drones with various types of cameras, IR, various other stuff?
Infrared, I've used that in the past. It doesn't work real well. Like it'll draw like algae and stuff. And you have to do that. We did ours at night. But for drones, like we were talking about yesterday, there's a lot of regulations around them for flight patterns and things. And then we have some moratoriums on how close you can fly drones to archaeological sites. So there are some possibilities under a controlled environment, and I've seen some good photos of that. But as a steward, that's probably not something you would encounter or really have the opportunity to do without, I mean, it would take a lot of paperwork and coordination and making sure you've got all of your flight plans in place and this and that and the other thing. But yeah, there is potential there for sites that are hard to access. I've seen some people use drones to take some nice photographs of like Fremont granaries that are inaccessible. So, and sometimes they have rock art associated with them as well.